Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome into Buckeye Talk. I'm Stefan Krajisnik. That's Andrew Gillis. And Andrew, there's a big game in a few months. I don't know if you checked the schedule, but we're going down to Austin, Texas on September 12th. Well, we'll go a couple days earlier, I guess, but we'll be there September 12th because Ohio State plays at Texas this year. And that's a game that's becoming pretty routine on the schedule, I think, for the Buckeyes.
So I follow a lot of NFL people on my timeline too. And I texted you guys this, and I texted some other people this. It's very abundant who watches college football and who doesn't in NFL circles when you start talking about the draft, because just the way that people react to certain draft picks and, hey, who's this guy? And we're like, if you watch college football, you know who that is. What are you doing? But the last few days on my timeline have been pretty much, oh my goodness, Julian Sayin and Jeremiah Smith versus Arch Manning and Cam Coleman and the 2027 NFL draft. And I think Gooseby is the tackle's name out of Texas that everybody's freaking out about as like an elite prospect. And everybody's going to be looking at that game. So yeah, like it's one of those things where for a game that is, would that be 4 months away at this point, over 4 months away? Feels like the hype is already kind of starting to roll here.
I wrote about it this week because I knew this was going to happen. Like I had a line in the article that's like the media circus around Jeremiah Smith is about to start. And like that's literally what this week has been. Like everyone has just been like, is Jeremiah Smith the best wide receiver prospect ever? I saw a tweet that was like, are we sure Jeremiah Smith is that good? And I was just like, here we go. Like 12 months of this, I guess. Well, how lucky are we that we get to do this? So it's like, enjoy Jeremiah Smith, the Ohio State receiver, because everything around him is going to be fart noise, like Gillis just said there. So this Texas game is going to be a big game. It's the first big game on Ohio State's schedule. We'll be there. We'll be texting about that game all throughout these next few months as we lead up to it. Get the text 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. But what we want to talk about today, we're going to do a little bit of a draft here because something caught my attention. And Gillis, as you alluded to there, it's kind of like a no-duh. There's going to be a lot of talent in this game. But I think when you see it like tangibly written in front of you and you kind of start to process, just how much talent is going to be on the field, it caught my attention. So I was looking at Dane Brugler for The Athletic. He had his first 2027 mock draft come out, which, by the way, Brugler is one of the guys I really like in terms of mock drafts and things like that. I think everyone kind of has their I think this guy's right. And it's like, okay, did he just have your team taking the player that you wanted them to take? Or do you think he's actually really good at what he does?
Was he nice to your players? Yeah. Was he nice to your favorite team?
Did he have 10 Buckeyes in the top 10? Okay, then he gets our seal of approval. But here's the guys that he had in his top 10 that are going to be in this Ohio State-Texas game on September 12th. Arch Manning going first overall to the Cardinals. Jeremiah Smith going second overall to the Dolphins. Let me scroll down here. Cam Coleman, wide receiver, going to the Raiders with the 6th overall pick. Colin Simmons, edge rusher from Texas, to the Saints with the 7th overall pick. So we're talking about a good collection of guys here. 1, 2, 3, 4 guys that could go in the top 10 that are playing in this game. And I think back to last year's game as well. Cam Coleman wasn't in that game, but outside of him, Cardinal Tate, Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Arch Manning, Jeremiah Smith, Colin Simmons, all played in that game, all went top 10, right? And that doesn't include Julian Sayin. That doesn't include Caleb Downs, right? Caleb Downs was the 11th overall pick. Julian Sayin could very well end up being a top 10 pick next year. But I wanted to use this mock draft as the basis and then what we know from last year's draft. So there's 7 guys on this list. Cardinal Tate, Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Arch Manning, Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman, who we now will include in this conversation, and Colin Simmons. And I told Andrew, I sent him an email yesterday, and I said, picture you're an NFL GM, you're putting together a big board, but positional value doesn't matter, right? You're not the Cardinals who are desperate for a quarterback. You're not the Raiders who don't need a quarterback, right? Like just put these guys in a list of like what you think of them as NFL prospects. So we're including the 4 guys who just went top 10, and then the 3 guys who could go, the 3 guys who just went top 10 and the 4 guys who could go top 10 next year. So Gillis, let's go. Okay, because I know how these drafts have gone for us when we talked about 2027. So why don't we start at number 1? And
Yeah, this
I
is easy.
assume we both have Jeremiah Smith here.
Yeah, and I want to make this disclaimer very obvious for our audience because I don't think that the people listening to this disagree. You don't need to take anyone seriously who has a take that's like, I don't know, is Charlie Becker better than Jeremiah Smith? Like, is Cam Coleman in the same? No, just stop it. Come on. Like, Jeremiah Smith is a generational receiver prospect. We mentioned this on the pod a little bit. He is in the category of Julio Jones and Calvin Johnson, like Keyshawn Johnson, like one of the best receiver prospects in the history of football. It's a little bit like, Fernando Mendoza, where it's like, hey, he's number one overall quarterback. That's great. But Fernando Mendoza is not Andrew Luck. So yeah, it's Jeremiah Smith. He's the best, and there's nobody close. Sorry.
And this is so we don't have to have too much of a conversation of Jeremiah as an NFL prospect, because I agree with you. Like if you think anything otherwise of what Gillis just said, then like I don't know what to tell you. Like if you think Cam Coleman is better than Jeremiah Smith, then like I just don't know what to tell you. And who knows? Maybe one guy ends up having a better NFL career than the other. Like that's as prospects. What we're talking about now, there's not a conversation to be had there. So let me ask you this instead. Because Jeremiah Smith's played in some big games at Ohio State. We know what he did in that freshman year college football playoff run. He's played against Michigan twice, played, game at Oregon, big non-conference game against Texas last year. Texas is the one team that is kind of, I'll say, had his number. I know the context of that is it's not like there was one. It's not like Malik Muhammad was lining up one-on-one with him and just beating him every time, right? Like the Texas's defense in its totality, in its game plan, has done well in terms of statistically slowing down Jeremiah Smith. He still had impacts in those games, right? We saw plays that Carnell Tate and Emeka Ibuka and running backs made, and some of that as a result of the attention that was drawn to Jeremiah Smith, surely. Is this game one you have circled where you're like, I would love to see JJ pop against this Texas team? And I don't know if it's get over the hump. I don't know what it is, how you want to phrase it, but like, are you circling this game as one of the 2-3 most important games for Jeremiah Smith this season? And is it number one in terms of regular season games?
Hard to say that anything's number one compared to Michigan, just
Fair.
because that is always going to take the cake. But like, I think it's interesting where in 2024, the Cotton Bowl, it very much felt like a Jordan Rule situation where it was like anybody but JJ is going to beat us. Like we talked about that. Carnell Tate, I think, dropped like a walk-in touchdown on the first drive of the game or something like that. Like we were, this is going to be Carnell Tate game. This is going to be an Emeka Ibuka game. Blah 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 blah. 2025 felt like kind of like JJ's problem a little bit. Like he had like 2 or 3 drops in the first half, and you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense. So it's an important game, but I think it's an important game for like kind of the surrounding elements of Jeremiah Smith. Like Jeremiah Smith is the sun, and everything else is going to gravitate around him. Because I don't know, how does Brandon Inniss play? This is the first time you're going to play Texas without, a locked-in, surefire first-round pick that's opposite JJ. Mm-hmm. So how, or perhaps potentially on the same side of the field as JJ. Like, how do you, game plan that out, and what kind of attention does JJ draw to where that's no longer the case? How does Arthur Smith game plan it open? Because what you're not going to do, and what is unacceptable, is to look at JJ and say, well, he had 2 targets today because they triple teamed him the whole game. Oh, no. It's not my problem. Figure it out. Like, throw him a tunnel screen, throw him a bubbles, give him the ball in the back. Whatever you got to do to get him the ball, you get him the ball. So it's an important game for Jeremiah Smith, but I think it's just as important of a game to kind of see maybe how teams are going to try to take him away this season. Because if it works for Texas, believe you me, Indiana's going to do the same thing. Yep. And if it were, like Oregon's going to do the same thing. Michigan's going to try to do the same thing. USC's going to try to do the same thing. So, I think it's in that realm of like, I don't think JJ needs to have a big game, but I think the surrounding elements are going to be very important of whether he has a big game or does not. How does that happen? Why does that happen?
Yeah, it's what's interesting about this is I think you're right. For the Jeremiah Smith conversation, like, does he need to have a big game, like, for himself or anything like that? Like, probably not. Like, he's a top 5 pick. I want, like, maybe it's a big game in that sense then for Arthur Smith, right? Like, because you talk about who these other receivers are, and it's, we all think this is a great unit, but, like, this is going to be Chris Henry Jr.'s first time playing on the stage. This is going to be Brock Boyd's first time playing on the stage. And then with the other guys, Kyle Parker, Brandon Inniss, Devin McEwen, they've been in these scenarios before, right? Like, I think, I can't remember if LSU played Texas, but Devin McEwen, I'm pretty sure, has played against Texas while he was at UTSA. We know Brandon Inniss has played against, and maybe Kyle Parker has, maybe hasn't, but he's played against power conference competition. So it's not like their first time on that stage, but also they haven't had to be like a dude on that stage, right? Like they were not, it's not like Brandon Inniss was getting 200 yards when they were playing against Texas or something like that. So I wonder how much this is just a big game for Arthur Smith in the sense of like, they're going to do what they do against JJ. You got to find ways to work around that. Like you said, JJ can't have 2 targets. JJ needs to have a big game in the sense of like Ohio State needs to go out of its way to make sure that he gets his, because I think that's a key to them winning. I don't know if his stat line against Texas from the Cotton Bowl or Texas from the regular season game last year, I don't know if those stat lines work for an Ohio State win this year. Based on what's around him, based on the attention that's going to be on him, Arthur Smith has to find ways to make it happen. So he's the best NFL prospect, though, in this game. Like, I have no doubts about that.
It's really not a debate. Just the other interesting thing before we move on, do you know who Texas' defensive coordinator is? Because Pete Kwiatkowski
is it
left.
Muschamp?
It's Will Muschamp.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Arthur Smith versus Will Muschamp is a coordinator matchup that sounds like a Mad Libs, but here we are.
It's, you can never count anything out in college football. You never really know what you're going to get. Okay, so now we're going to start working backwards. I knew JJ was going to be number 1 for both of us, so I was like, let's just cut to the chase here. So who do you have at number 7 on your list here?
So that would be last. This one was kind of maybe a little bit more difficult than I thought. I have Cam Coleman last. Like I understand, the dynamic of, hey, there's, other players at the top and blah, 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 blah. But like Cam Coleman last year at Auburn, 56 catches, 708 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. I think any person you listen to about the draft in 27, and I know I just said, haha, they don't watch, like a lot of these people don't watch college football. There are a lot that do, and I want to be clear. So, the general consensus that I think you get is that like he's really talented, but he's really raw. And I'm not there yet of like, whoa, this guy is, oh my goodness, like how this is a number 10 overall pick. This is a number 5 overall. Like this is a, he's right there with JJ. Like you're not in that conversation yet. And like, frankly, like I think you're almost betting on upside. And maybe this is just us being spoiled by the Ohio State receiver conversation, where it's just like, what do you mean? You don't have an elite first round pick ready to go every single year? That's crazy. Like maybe it's that, but he's had 2 really good years at Auburn, but we're also talking about other dudes who went, 5th with Arvell, 7th with Sonny, 4th with Tate, and then Colin Simmons, Arch Manning, Cam Coleman, and Jeremiah Smith. Somebody's got to be last in this category, and it was Cam Coleman for me.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about guys that will probably land in or near the top 10 of the NFL draft, right? So it's like whoever's number 7 on our list could very well be like the number 8 player in his draft class, right? Like that's the conversation we're having here. I agree with you. I had him at number 7 as well. I go back and forth on it because I understand Auburn's offense the last couple of years has just been, fart noise again, for lack of a better term, right? Like what Hugh Freeze did there, like it just didn't work. What they had at quarterback just did not work. There is part of me though that you kind of look at Coleman's numbers and the stat lines, and it's like, last year he had 2 100-yard games, and they were against, Mizzou, which was a decent defense, and Vandy, which was a decent team, but it's like played against Alabama 4 for 26, played against Georgia 7 for 50. He had an okay game against Oklahoma, 3 for 88 and a touchdown, but it's just like in some of these biggest games for Auburn, he wasn't necessarily the difference maker for them. And I kind of circle that. Whereas, you go through some of these guys that we're going to talk about, like some of their best games have come against, the best level of competition. So, do you think for sure Cam Coleman will be the second highest drafted receiver in this game?
In this game?
Yeah. So this is no longer a 2027 conversation.
So you're saying like if he goes 8th?
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're okay. I'll say no. Because Texas also does have some really good receivers. I just kind of like, it's almost like a law of like averages type of thing where it's like there's just so many Ohio State guys. It's one of them's bound to hit. I don't know if that's law of averages, but you don't come here for math and science predictions. Like there's just a lot of players to sift through. Like, I don't know, could Chris Henry Jr. be the 5th overall pick?
That's who I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, like could he be that type of like, holy crap, like this guy, like I said it on the pod before, it's like, hey, this is just Mike Evans reincarnated. Hip hip hooray, let's take him 5th. Like, all right, maybe, maybe that's the case. So, I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
Are you gonna say no?
I agree with you. I think Chris Henry Jr. is going to end up going higher than Cam Coleman whenever he gets drafted. So Cam Coleman, like you said, is very raw. I think Chris Henry Jr. is also very raw. Chris Henry Jr. is doing it at Ohio State. Cam Coleman was developing at Auburn. Like, I'm just going to tell myself that in a few years, when Chris Henry Jr. is getting drafted, he's going to be ahead of where Cam Coleman is. I think that's just going to make him a better prospect. So that's what it is for me. So we're in lockstep on number 1. We're in lockstep on number 7. So let's see where we go from here. I'll go next. At number 6, I have Carnell Tate, which I think is fascinating because of the Ohio State players who just went in the top 10, he went higher than all of them. But I got to be kind of true to where I was going into the 2026 NFL draft and kind of how I had some of these prospects ranked, especially the guys from Ohio State. And I had Carnell Tate, below guys like Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese, who are going to be obviously higher on my list. But Carnell Tate's an awesome NFL. I think he's going to be an awesome NFL talent. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the agility, right? Like we don't have to have this huge Carnell Tate conversation because we did it last week. But this is where I have him. I have him just ahead of Cam Coleman and number 6 on my list.
I have. Well, do you want me to say who I don't have him at? I don't have Carnell at number 6. Do you want me to say who I have at number? Do you want me to say where I have Carnell, or do you want me to say who I have at number 6?
Let's do where you have Carnell.
I have Carnell 5th.
Okay.
So I have him one spot higher. I get the whole Malik Neighbors argument. He was never a wide receiver 1 on his own team. He was never that. I don't care. He was the best receiver in the 2026 NFL draft. I wrote about that during the season. I felt very confident during the season. Like I think it was to you and Steven in the press box. I was like, there are things that Carnell I think does that are like just as good, if not better, than JJ. And I was like, Carnell is one of the better receivers I've seen at the college level. Like, make catches along the sideline, like flashy hands, aggressive hands, showy hands, strong, whatever you want to call it. He's elite at that. And I thought Carnell was a dog. So, I get it. He was never number 1 on his own team, but like, I think the NFL just told us they don't really care about that either. And the Tennessee Titans don't, because, oh no, they didn't. They picked him too early. Okay. What was his floor? 7 to Washington? Like that, like, I don't know. That feels very unique to me. So Carnell Tate was my 5th. That dude rocked. So
yeah. This is maybe a good example of why he was never wide receiver 1 argument doesn't matter. Is like Cam Coleman was like one of the biggest portal additions this offseason, so he could be Texas's wide receiver 1. It's like, we'll take Carnell Tate over that guy. So, and listen, if Carnell Tate was ever in the transfer portal, well, Carnell Tate was never in the transfer portal, and there were teams that were willing to make him the most lucrative transfer in the nation. So that's very well documented. Okay, so give me your number 6 then.
I have Arch at number 6.
They're going to come after you.
I understand, but we're looking at it right now, and Arch was draft eligible this year. I understand. Like, I saw a report from somebody. I think he covers Texas, or at least he does like film breakdowns or whatever for Texas, and he was like, "Yeah, Arch had like a broken foot, or he had like foot procedure or something. He was playing on a messed up foot all year." okay, but like, I can't take that into account. Like they played Ohio State in the first game of the year. He went 17 of 30 for 170 passing with a touchdown and a pick, 10 rushes, 38 yards. And a handful of those yards came, at the end of that game where, Ohio State had kind of backed off. Florida, a game that they lost, he threw 2 picks in, 16 to 29 for 263. Oklahoma, I thought, he had a pretty decent game, 21 to 27, 166 and a touchdown against a pretty good defense in Brent Venables. But like cooked against Vanderbilt, didn't really play that well, I don't think, against Georgia when they got smoked. Texas A&M, 14 to 29 for 179 and a touchdown, 7 rushes, 53 yards. Like I think the potential is there. I think the thing about Texas this year, and we'll get into this over these next couple of months, but I think the interesting thing right now to talk about these like individual prospects is it feels very potential based, not very like what is based. Mm-hmm. Like when we talk about like another Texas player on this list, it's very much like, oh, he's really, really good. Like we've seen it. Like right. I know it's good. With Arch Manning, it's like, oh, I think he can be this. Like if the NFL draft was this year and CJ Carr and Julian Sayin and Dante Moore all came out, like, I don't know. I wouldn't take Arch Manning first. I wouldn't have Arch Manning at the top of that list. So, I understand it's a projection, but he is the guy that when you get to the end of the line, he could be number 2 on this list. Like easy.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that would be totally reasonable for him to get to that level. But I just haven't seen that like dominant, oh, this guy's better than everybody else type of play from Arch Manning. Sorry. Well, I don't think the listeners of this podcast are going to be like, oh wow, I can't believe Andrew said that. I think they're going to be like, hell yeah.
I mean, I have Arch at number 5. I'm 1 spot higher than you do, so it's not like I completely disagree either.
We have Carnell and Arch flipped,
right?
Yeah.
He if he came out this year, he still might have been like higher than Dante and CJ Carr, but that's just like, that's an NFL teams like thing. That's not like a we agree or disagree thing. It's just like, if you told an NFL team that there's a Manning who's 6'4", 219 and had a decent season at Texas, I think that they would be pretty intrigued. So his stat line was 3,100 yards, 26 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. If Tavian St. Clair has that stat line next year as Ohio State's starting quarterback, and they go somewhere between 9-3 and 10-2, what do you think the conversation with Tavian is going into senior year? And let me tell you why I asked that, because I think Arch Manning has benefited a ton from his last name. I wonder sometimes if we forget that, like, he was also a very raw talent, did not play high level high school football. I wonder if his last name also kind of hurts him sometimes in this conversation, because it's like, just because he's a Manning doesn't mean that he can't struggle in his first year as a starter after being kind of, yes, he's a top prospect, but he's a little bit of a developmental, piece as well in terms of what he was coming from. Like, I just wonder if his name was Tavian St. Clair and like what we would be saying about him going into year 4. And maybe it's the same. Maybe it's the same thing, because it's like, hey, you're an Ohio State quarterback, you went 9-3. Like, that's unacceptable. But I don't know. Like, do you think the name hurts him at any point?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because we're talking about quarterbacks for this game, and as you were talking, I had to look down at my phone because Wonderful Mons is going to commit on Friday, May 1st. I think that's Friday. So he's going to commit at 12:30 on the McAfee show. He's going to decide between Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Florida State. Actually, it doesn't say a time. It doesn't say a time. So he'll commit at some point on the McAfee show on May 1st. So I was looking down at that when you said that. So it's like the quarterback conversation never stops. Like it's always about quarterbacks now and forever. So the question was, does Manning's last name hurt him?
Yeah, like at any point, like if his name was Tavian St. Clair, how would we view what his junior season just now was?
With less fervor. I think the name Manning hurt him early. And I think it's probably dissipated a little bit.
Okay.
Like, I think when you show up on campus and you throw on a jersey and you're playing quarterback that has Manning on the back of it, like, it's the miracle quote. The name on the front, well, the name on the front versus the name on the back. All right, well, the name on the back of Manning jersey is pretty significant too. So I think it's been one of those things where it's like the more that, like, the longer you get away from him doing something for the first time, it just kind of dissipates. So I think the hype was unbelievable and insane for what he could be going into his first year as a starter last season. But I don't know. I think right now, I don't think it hurts him. I think it probably helps him a little bit because his name is always in the news and in the topics. But you know, he didn't have a bad year. He just, I don't think, showed like, oh, I'm the number 1 overall pick in a year. Write it down.
Do you think it would be a successful season for Tavian if that's what it looks like next year?
That's a great question. And
does your answer change if I say they went 9-3 or 10-2?
Probably, because like 9-3 and 27 is like, if Ohio State goes 9-3 and 26, you're like, maybe they still make the playoff because their schedule's ridiculous, and you can still kind of talk like, okay, how do we, blah blah blah. 3,163 yards passing in 13 games, 26 touchdowns, 7 picks, 61% completion percentage, 399 yards rushing with 10 rushing touchdowns. So 36 combined touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 61% completion percentage. I think that probably is a little bit better on paper than maybe it was, because I don't think Arch played the best in their best games. Think about like what you saw from, Ohio State quarterbacks, where it was like, in a 4-team playoff world, we're not talking about Will Howard like we do. We're not, so, in a 12-team playoff world, I guess the same goes for going, 9-3 instead of 10-2. So I would probably lean no, because he's probably going to have better weapons.
Next big hypothetical story that we're going to dig into and write 3,000 words on. I know I proposed one yesterday. I can take this one because yesterday I was pitching you a recruiting one. 3,000 words on how, if the playoff doesn't expand, Will Howard doesn't shotgun a beer with Luke Combs inside Ohio Stadium.
Yeah.
In front of 97,000 people.
Yeah, Luke Combs doesn't show up because the stadium's burned to the ground. That's a terrifying kind of hypothetical for 2024. It's also like a fascinating hypothetical of like 2015, where it's just like it goes both ways for Ohio State, right? Where you're like, hey, if you don't make the playoff in 2024 because you lost to Michigan, it's a 14 playoff. That's not good for a lot of people. However, in 2015, when you lose to Michigan State, like, I think Zeke had the flu or something and they didn't give him the ball. It's like, hey, if you're in a 12-team playoff, maybe they're fine.
Yeah.
So it's a good and bad. It's a good and bad retrospective.
Okay. Let's take our first break, and then we'll do our 2, 3, and 4 rankings on this list, and then we'll talk about some more things after our draft. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. And welcome back into Buckeye Talk. Andrew Gillis, Stefan Krajisnik doing our draft of the likely, or at least projected, 7 first-rounders between 7 top 10 picks between last year's Ohio State-Texas game and this year's Ohio State-Texas game. Andrew, we both have Jeremiah Smith at number 1. We both have Cam Coleman at number 7. I have Arch Manning at 5 and Carnell Tate at 6. Andrew has the flip where he has Carnell Tate at 5 and Arch Manning at 6. Okay, you can go ahead. Who do you got at number 4?
This was like the hardest kind of, I think, trio.
2, 3, 4 stretch was difficult, yeah.
Yeah, I have Sonny here.
Yep.
I think Sonny was a great middle linebacker. He was, in terms of what he could do on the field, was a lot. But if I was kind of evaluating this as like an NFL GM, I think you want to look at and say, okay, where does that versatility come from? Okay, what can you do differently, and who can you benefit by doing that? Where can you play? What kind of different things can you do? How well can you do it? There's an element of looking at just the upside here, and I went on a podcast in DC to talk about Sonny, and I literally said like his upside is gold jacket in the NFL, because like I don't know if like Fred Warner's a good comp for him, because I think Fred was probably a little bit better in coverage, but like Sonny's sideline to sideline speed, you could just eliminate so much with that. And I just kind of waxed poetic about it, and I was like, and it's kind of crazy because Caleb Downs is probably the best defensive player on that team. And it's kind of crazy because I think you get there and you're like, you know what, maybe there's two other dudes that, you know, in terms of what their upside is, I think maybe it's a little bit higher.
Yeah, this conversation is funny because it's like Caleb Downs isn't part of it because he went number 11 instead of number 10. Julian Sand isn't part of this, and he could very well be a top 10 pick. And then it's like, I don't know, we just did this earlier this week where it's like, would you be shocked if Edric like started making his way up mock drafts? Would you be shocked if, I don't know, Peyton Pierce or Jalen McClain or someone started making their way up mock drafts? And it's like, we could very well in like 12 months be looking back and be like, how was Edric Houston not part of this conversation that we had, even though he played in all three of those Texas games, the Cotton Bowl, 2025 regular season, 2026 regular season. It's fascinating. I have Sonny at number 2, and I think this kind of goes back to the conversation we had last week, where it was just like those physical traits, the athleticism, the production, and the experience that he got at Ohio State. Like you put all that together, I thought he was the best prospect in this past draft class for Ohio State, which is a compliment, I guess, to your Commanders, because then that's the best value pick of the draft. We got him at number 7, and he's better than, or better prospect than the 2 Ohio State guys taken in front of him. So that's where I have Sonny. I have him at number 2. My number 4 was Arvell Reese. This is where I had Arvell. Everyone knows how high I am on Arvell. Again, okay. So you have Arvell at number
flipped.
2.
I had Arvell second.
Okay. So we agree on number 3 then. But Arvell is just he's a bit more of a raw prospect at his position, I think, than some of the other people we're going to talk about. But again, another ultra talented guy. I think Giants fans are going to love him. We'll see what the Giants plan on doing. I think Malik Neighbors was probably onto something when he was like, okay, we'll see what happens here with Thibodeau and all the dudes that they have along that defensive line. See where Arvell Reese kind of fits into that edge spot. But I have a number 4 here just because I think everyone I have in front of him is very like defined at their position, and you know what you're getting. With Arvell, I think there's a little bit of a more raw kind of projection, and that was kind of the deciding factor for me there.
Yeah, 100%. It's upside and projection. I think positional versatility, like Steven had been talking about, like why can't Sonny rush off the edge? He's 6'5" and 247 pounds. And I'm like, of course he can rush off the edge, right? He's a massive piece of like human being that can just do that, right? I mean, if I were to tell you that your favorite team in the NFL drafted a 6'5", 247 pound edge rusher ran a 4.46 40, you're gonna be like, yeah, cool, great, that's wonderful. So you can do that with Sonny. I just think Arvell had done it. Like I listened to the Harbaugh press conference in New York where he was like, oh, we're gonna move him around a little bit. He's gonna play off ball. He's gonna do this. He's gonna do that. And like I think that positional versatility, I think that matters. And I can't get the idea of Micah Parsons out of my head, man. Like I can't get this like concept of like first down, he's your, kind of off-ball linebacker, or even in like, third and short, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, Arvell Reese bumps back to linebacker, you put in a bigger defensive end, all of a sudden it's, a little bit more size down there, and you have Arvell just kind of like as a wrecking crew with a full head of steam. Like there's just so much you can do with him. I don't know, like 2, 3, 4 were very interchangeable to me, but I had Arvell there because of the versatility and that upside.
I think you make the Micah Parsons comparison, like 5 years, Jerry Jones is going to be sitting there watching the Giants like extend Arvell Reese, their version of Micah Parsons, and he's going to be like, I didn't know you could do that. I thought that the Giants were going to have to trade him away after 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, because that's what we had to do with our Micah Parsons. So, okay, so we both have Colin Simmons at number 3, edge rusher from Texas. Quite honestly, like his performances against Ohio State, the 2 times he's faced them, haven't been the most, I don't know, like dominant performances, right? Like I think he had half a sack in that Cotton Bowl. I don't think he had anything last year going up against them. So I think as much as we talk about, like, is this a big game for Jeremiah Smith? I think it's also a massive game for Colin Simmons. Like, what does it look like going up against? I mean, year one, it was Donovan Jackson at left tackle. It's still funny to think about that. Donovan Jackson at left tackle, Josh Fryer at right tackle. Last year's Austin Sareveld and Philip Daniels. This year, it'll be some duo of Ian Moore, Austin Sareveld, and Philip Daniels, right? Like, there's an opportunity for him to kind of show up. And I initially had him lower on my list because of that, because against Ohio State, he hadn't showed up, and I was starting to wonder what he was doing in the biggest games compared to his production in some of the other games. And then you open his stat line, it's like, I think the last 5 games last year, he had at least a sack in each of them, and that's going up against. Yeah. It's like Michigan was on that list, A&M was on that list, Georgia was on that list, right? He played some pretty good teams down the stretch last year and ended up with 12 sacks. So it's like he ended up being a pretty good player last year in some of the biggest games for this Texas team. So and it's like it's the opposite of the Arvell conversation. He's very defined to like his position, right? He's not a raw edge rusher like who's coming along and learning a new position. Like, he is an edge rusher and has been a high level player since he was a true freshman at Texas, which, like, that's very hard to do as a freshman in the SEC or in the Big Ten, to play as an edge rusher at that high of a level, like as a true freshman. And I know it was a huge debate. Like, he ended up winning freshman of the year, and it's like, okay, maybe I should have gone to Jeremiah Smith, but Colin Simmons is still a very good player. Like, it's not a knock on him. It's more of a nod toward Jeremiah Smith. So what do you like about Colin Simmons, and why do you have him ahead of Sonny Styles but below Arvell Reese?
Yeah. The element to me of him doing it for 2 years as like a freshman, I think, was really impressive. Haven't you heard he was the best freshman in 2024? I don't know if you knew that, but a bunch of people said that he was. I'll leave it at that. So Colin Simmons was, I mean, look, I don't mean that to take away from him. Like, he was awesome as a freshman, right? Like, he was really, really good. And, this is kind of one of those takes where it's like, Ohio State fans, of course, are not going to look at that and say, of course, who's Colin Simmons? He had 2 tackles and 0 sacks against us. Yeah, that's nothing, right? Okay, you have 2.5 sacks against Oklahoma, 3 sacks against Kentucky. Didn't have a sack against Mississippi State, but he did have 6 tackles. And then every single game the rest of the year for the final 5 games against Vanderbilt, top 10 team at the time, Georgia, top 5 team at the time, Arkansas was unranked, A&M, number 3 in the country, and Michigan, 18. He had a sack in every single one of those games to end the year. He's a consistently really, really good pass rusher, and I think him doing it for that long, I think, has been really impressive. I think, yes, you are projecting a little bit with Colin, but like, it's not like a projection of Arch Manning, where I think with Arch Manning, it's like, oh, well, he's going to take a step to do something he hasn't done yet. Like, with Colin Simmons, it's like, oh, he's just going to keep getting better because we've seen evidence that he's going to keep getting better. So Colin Simmons is I think the 3 best defensive players in the draft next year are going to be Colin Simmons, Dylan Stewart, and Leonard Moore. And, the edge rusher from South Carolina and the corner from Notre Dame. Like, I think any one of those 3 can go as the first defensive player off the board. I understand, like, I guess there's an argument, like, if you have, if the Bengals suck this year, maybe they just take Colin Simmons instead of Jeremiah Smith. I don't know. I don't know what that hypothetical world looks like, but that doesn't matter to me. Jeremiah Smith's still better. Arvell Reese, I think, is just like an higher upside of like, whoa, he can do a lot of different things. He can move around a lot. The physical traits are there. We saw him be aggressive when he was rushing off pass rushing instinct alone. Like, he really wasn't even doing a lot. But yeah, Colin Simmons is one of those players, I think, as we get closer to the game, where we're going to have to kind of like warn people, like, just because he didn't blow up the game in 24 and just because he didn't blow up the game in 25 doesn't mean that can't happen in Austin, Texas. Like, you can't, I don't think, look at it and be like, well, we got him. We don't need to worry about it. We did it last year. We did it the year before. I mean, we're good. Maybe that's a good headline for a story that we could write in August of like, Ohio State has a new Reuben Bain on the schedule, and we got to figure out how to stop it.
That's intriguing.
He's a damn good football player.
Yeah, no, he is really good. I could even be devil's advocate on myself of having him above Arvell. It's like Colin Simmons is more defined as an edge rusher. It's like, okay, yeah, Arvell Reese is more versatile. It's like he's not sure, maybe he's labeled as an edge, but that's not exactly just what he is. So there's some versatility there that you could make a case against my own argument. That's talking about it, I don't think I realized it when I put the list together, but I think talking through it with you makes me realize that like the top two prospects, just in terms of like raw talent, like not positional value in this game, at least in our eyes, are Jeremiah Smith and Colin Simmons. And this will be their third time playing against each other in this series. And in neither of the last two games did we feel like those guys really blew up the game, right? And it's like, again, we watch the games. We know Texas put a lot of attention toward Jeremiah Smith. And if we were watching it from the other lens, we would be saying, well, Ohio State, at times was double teaming Colin Simmons or something like that, right? They're putting a lot of attention on him. Like that those things can be true, but neither of those guys, like in Colin Simmons' case, like blew up the game, or in Jeremiah Smith's case, like took over the game, however you want to phrase it. And it's interesting going into this third matchup of those two guys going up against each other, that like, is one of them gonna pop? Does JJ go for 150 and 2 touchdowns against Texas? Does Colin Simmons get 3 sacks against Ohio State? And it's like, really hope that doesn't happen, because it's going to be some really weird offensive line conversations that we're going to have literally 2 weeks into the season. So it's like, we don't have to think about that yet for our sanity. But it's just fascinating that those are such two good prospects, and we get to see them go, in this series 3 years in a row. Like that's rare in and of itself, right? To have a non-conference opponent that you face 3 times in a row, right? Like that's rare. And then for it to line up exactly with Colin Simmons, Jeremiah Smith, eras at those respective schools. I wonder if one of those guys does pop, if it's just like, that's the reason that team won, or like the other guy doesn't pop and it's like, that's the reason that team lost, right? I think it's an interesting storyline going into this game that I don't think I really realized until, we talked through this. So, okay. So that's our top 7, right? Looking at the top 10, either drafted or projected prospects from last year's Ohio State, Texas non-conference game, and this year's. My list is Jeremiah Smith, Sonny Styles, Colin Simmons, Arvell Reese, Arch Manning, Carnell Tate, and Cam Coleman. Gillis, your list is Jeremiah Smith, Arvell Reese, Colin Simmons, Sonny Styles, Carnell Tate, Arch Manning, Cam Coleman. So that's our top 7. So that's our quote-unquote draft of these prospects, these top 10 prospects in the Ohio State-Texas game. We're going to have one more conversation, just kind of – there's a lot like of things going on around like the college football world that like don't directly relate to Ohio State, but like when these things start to add up, you're like, okay, they're all kind of important to Ohio State. And it's our last pod for a week, so we're going to go a little longer here, so you guys have a little something to listen to over the course of a couple car rides or a couple days, doing PowerPoints or Excel sheets in your office, and we'll give you some more things to talk about. So we're going to take our second break here, and we'll be right back on Buckeye Talk. And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Andrew Gillis, Stefan Krajisnik, just doing our draft. I like that, Andrew. I liked kind of putting in perspective how much talent we've gotten to cover the last couple of years in the Ohio State-Texas game, and how much talent there is going to be left to cover in this game coming up. An interesting note that I kind of got me thinking, the Cotton Bowl that these teams played, the Jack Sawyer scoop and score game, no one in that immediate draft went in the top 10 except for Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle for Texas. And he wasn't even like that great of a player in that game. So that's like an interesting conversation in and of itself. So you had a Mecca go in the first round. What was it? Tyleek went in the first round. Donovan Jackson went in the first round. Josh Simmons didn't play in that game, but he ended up going in the first round. But only one top 10 pick in the immediate draft after the Cotton Bowl, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then this past draft a week ago, no first round picks for Texas.
That's
kind of surprising, right?
Yeah. It's surprising. I think Texas has maybe been building a little bit towards 26. So like maybe that has something to do with it too. I would need to kind of do a deeper dive onto that roster. But yeah, like you would think you would at least have one, like especially with the talent that they've been pulling in.
Yeah. Yeah. I was very surprised, but I was looking through it and I was like, okay, I know Ohio State had, 4 guys taken in the top 11, and then you end up, Caden McDonald early second. I was like, where's Texas? Like, did they have anyone top 10? I was like, oh no, they didn't have anyone in the top 32. So there's that. Okay. There's a lot going on in college football. There's a lot going on in college sports. Like, we're not even going to touch on the NCAA tournament expanding to 76 teams because that's just, we've already made like 2 or 3 like fart noise references on this podcast. So like having a 4th probably isn't worth it. If Ohio State is on the bubble again, then like, I don't know, they're probably going to get in, like, because 76 teams are getting in.
500, like, just to throw in real quick, like, making the NCAA tournament kind of isn't the bar. Like it definitely
at Ohio State, that should not be the bar anymore.
Yeah, it definitely like lowers, because would the I would have to go back and look, but like would the 24-25 team have made it?
Probably.
Like, yeah,
it would have been like I think we're gonna get more games in Dayton. Like, is the vibe that I'm getting from this. So like, it probably would have been in Dayton or something like that. But which is cool, I guess, if you're a fan. Like, it's an easy way to watch your team play in the do or die game. But I don't know. I'm very, some things are like perfect in this world, and 64 team NCAA tournament was perfect. We ruined that already by adding the first four. But it's like, okay, the first four games in a vacuum are kind of fun. Like that. You get like that Miami game this year. There's a lot of energy. You were there covering it for us. Like, I've covered games there in the past too. Like, it's fun when you're in it. I don't know if we need it necessarily, but teams want to make money and whatever. 76 is just, it's too much. Now, I don't think it's just going to be, this past season it was like Indiana and Auburn where the bubble teams are like nobody really wanted to see it. And a couple of years ago it was Ohio State. Like, there are going to be, like, does the MAC get a second team in, some more consistently, right? Like, does the Atlantic 10 get 3 or 4 teams in pretty consistently? Like, sure, there is kind of this mid-major benefit to it, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. But on the football side of things, there's the Brendan Sorsby story going around of him stepping away from Texas and seeking treatment for a gambling addiction. Details like a few hours before we started recording this on April 29th came out of just like he was placing or has placed like tens of thousands of bets, like was placing like 20 bets in a day at a time. The bets were as specific as like balls and strikes at a Cincinnati Reds game. And like, sure, he was betting like $1. He's been like $2.50, like $2.50 at times, but it's just like, that's a lot of bets to be placing. But the worst part of this is obviously Brendan Sorsby, if you don't know, was the quarterback at Indiana, ended up being a good quarterback in Cincinnati, and made a boatload of money this year to go be Texas Tech's next quarterback. While he was at Indiana, he didn't play in the game, but he bet on Indiana to win football games, which, like, betting on 2022 Indiana, like, as never wrong, just early, I guess. But there's two sides of this conversation. And then I think then we can have kind of the Ohio State specific conversation to this of like, and cleveland.com is part of it. You can go to our website and there's stuff about, DraftKings promos and FanDuel and all these sites. I'm sure, whatever the ads are, that you guys listen to, as you listen to this pod, I wouldn't be surprised if sometimes it is FanDuel or DraftKings or something like that getting talked about. And it's like, if you join and you place $5 and you get $200 free dollars, and like, that's how you get people hooked. And like the betting has become a very normal part of our society. And I think if you're an 18 to 22-year-old college student, that can very quickly turn from something fun to something addictive. And like that, you feel for guys like Brendan Sorsby, and I'm sure there's guys all around the country. And I know people who like didn't play college football, but they were in college when these bets, betting sites got legalized, and like you get hooked, right? Like the dopamine rush of winning a bet is like, people love that and they chase it, right? In the same way that people do drugs or alcohol or whatever it may be. Like there's that part of it. But then there's also the other part of this conversation of like, it has been such an understood rule in college sports or sports in general for forever that you don't bet on the team that you play for, right? Like Pete Rose got in a lot of trouble for it. The White Sox in the early 1900s got in a lot of trouble for it, right? This is going on for, more than a century of like, you don't bet on the team that you play for. So I go back and forth on the Sorsby situation because I'm like, I feel for him. I feel for people in his shoes. Like it's not an easy thing. And like we as a society probably need to take a big picture look at the gambling and like what we're doing in terms of how accessible it is on your cell phones. But I think there's also part of this of just like, he broke the most like understood rule in sports. And if he's not allowed to play another college football game again, I don't think Texas Tech should be all that surprised.
Nope. That's like rule number one, right? Like you said, it's like, that's like the rule. And I think the timing that this happened is interesting because everybody just finished up their spring games. Like if this happened in September or like March, like when every program around the country, Ohio State obviously is a massive example because we bring a small militia to every media availability, right? Like we just have a million people. Ryan Day would get asked about this.
Oh yeah.
And he wouldn't get asked about it in the, what do you think about the Brendan Sorsby thing? That's crazy. It would be, what are you doing to manage this? And I think that is just kind of another one of those worlds where it's like so much is changing. There's a lot to kind of understand with college kids, and it's almost like you want to control them, but you can't, right? Like, you want to have this idea of like what they're doing, but they're also grown adults, and you need to kind of let them live their lives. I remember when I was living in Cincinnati covering the Bengals, I was asking a couple of players because I was going to write a story on it. Funny enough, like a week or two before I moved to Columbus to cover Ohio State. So I didn't know I was going to move yet, but I was, I talked to their NFLPA rep, and I was asking like all these, hey, what is this? What is that? And they're explaining this, like the way it works in professional sports is like, if you're on the team bus, that counts as like you can't bet at the facility. You can't bet here. You can't bet there. And like I asked Zach Taylor about this, their coach, and he was basically like, look, this is something you just got to stay diligent on. And I think this is something that it's one of those good reminders of like, hey, if you're Ryan Day, if you're a position coach, if you're Mark Pantoni, if you're whoever, you got to really remind them, like, Brendan Sorsby might not ever play college football again. And like, who knows what this is going to do to his NFL draft stock. And like, this is, something that's really negative. And the last thing you want to do is take yourself out of a football season. The last thing you want to do is take yourself out of, contention for a high level NFL draft pick, because people were talking about him as like a first round pick. I don't know how that can happen now if he's not going to play at Texas Tech. So it's like, there's a lot of problems here. And I think if you're Ohio State, and if you're like, we're an Ohio State podcast, so if you're Ohio State, but if you're any program in the country, this is a great idea of, hey guys, look what can happen if you're not careful. Look what can happen if you're, it's a little bit like when Ohio State lost to Michigan in 2024. I guarantee you every rivalry game that got played at like 7:30 p.m. that night, every coach went, look what can happen if you're not careful, because Ohio State's way better than that team and they lost. That can happen to you if you're not careful. And I think that's probably the same messaging that you used here.
Yeah. Ryan Day, if I remember correctly, Ryan Day was asked about this not long ago. I can't remember if it was off season, during the season, but it was within the past like year and a half. I think it was Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch asked him about it. And, he talked about conversations that they have all the time with players, people that come in and talk to the team. I remember around March Madness, we were having something at the Woody, and I was walking in, and it might have been before Pro Day. I'm walking in, and there's like an ad like on the sidewalk. Like, you're like walking, you're looking at your phone, and you're like, what is beneath my feet right now? And it's a basketball and a March Madness logo and an Ohio State logo, and it says, Buckeyes don't bet. Student athletes and staff cannot participate in sports gambling or provide information to people associated with gambling. And then under that, it says, entry fee plus prize equals violation. And it's Ohio State logo and the Twitter profile for OSU compliance, right? Like, this was outside like the cafeteria area or the entrance, like the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, right? So this is very clearly something that's being talked about a ton at Ohio State, because like you said, Andrew, like, I know people who do like ticket sales for like professional teams, and it's like, you cannot bet on our team like that. Like, you can't do that, right? Let alone if you're playing, right? So like that part of the conversation, like, it better be understood, because if it's not understood, there's some serious repercussions. Like, the NCAA rule is basically that Sorsby cannot play again. Now we'll see if the way Texas Tech is handling this kind of grants them some mercy. I think Texas Tech is handling this the right way. If it's true that they found out about this only like a week or two ago, they're handling this the right way of being like, look, we're getting him help. And we'll see if the NCAA, looks at the situation and says like, we can ban him, or we can use them as an example of like how we help our student athletes go through, situations like this. I don't know. My guess is that he doesn't play a single snap for Texas Tech. That would just be my assumption.
Yeah, this feels like a 100-0 issue where like everybody looks at the NCAA as like the substitute teacher, just like parading over just a ruly classroom or an unruly classroom where you're just like, what are you really gonna do? What are you really gonna say? You don't have any authority here. This feels like one of those issues where like everybody will agree. Like if Brendan Sorsby.
I think a judge in Lubbock, Texas, would agree if Brendan Sorsby isn't allowed to play.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, you don't have those like conversations where it's just like, where did this judge go to college?
Right.
And like that was going on with Trinidad Chambliss and all this other stuff. Like, this feels very like, hey, yeah, you know what that feels about, right? Like, if Brendan Sorsby was the quarterback at Ohio State and we got on this podcast and we're like, guys, Brendan Sorsby is probably not going to play and he probably shouldn't be allowed to play in 2026, everybody would go, yeah, I get it. Sure. Like, everybody's on board with that. Like, that, it makes sense that you're not allowed to do this. So, that's the other thing. I hope Ohio State's mentioning this, and I hope Ohio State's bringing this up to players, and I hope every program in the country is bringing this up to players. Like, you are not going to get sympathy for this. Like, you are not going to get, hey, he's a kid, he made a mistake, he deserves some leniency. This is going to follow you around for a while. So, I hope that's part of the messaging that they give.
Yeah, it goes back to my original point of just like there's caveats that it's like you understand that this is not a good situation. Like, Brendan Sorsby deserves all the help that he can get, right? Like, that, get the help, but also there are repercussions that come with your actions, right? And this is obviously a very serious one, and we've seen it in other sports too. Like, it's not even just Brendan Sorsby betting on Indiana to win a football game. It's like a lot of our listeners are very aware of a situation with Emmanuel Clase, and it's like he's telling people to bet on this, and like, I don't know. I don't know the exact Clase situation, but from my understanding, it's not like he opened up DraftKings and like bet on himself, but like he was telling people like, hey, I'm going to throw a ball instead of a strike on my first pitch in the 9th inning against the Orioles or whatever it may be. Like, it's a very slippery slope, and like, these athletes need to know kind of what they're engaging with here. And then I think the other part of like why this matters to Ohio State is there's one portal window now, right? There's no Texas Tech can't go find Nico Iamaleava now, because Brendan Sorsby can't play for them. You have one portal window, and it moves fast, right? Ohio State's season ended December 31st, and by like January 1st, they had guys in the portal. They were getting guys out of the portal. You don't have like time for like background checks. Like, I don't know, like Gillis, you and I have both accepted new jobs and left jobs and like things like that. Like, you typically have to do like a drug test and background checks and all this kind of stuff to get a job. Like, I don't know how much of that is going on with the transfer portal, and these guys technically aren't employees, so I don't even know if it's like legal to do a background check on a kid that wants to transfer from University of Cincinnati to Texas Tech University. Like, that's still what this is at its core. It's like a guy transferring schools. But there's going to have to be some stuff put in place where if you have one shot to nail your roster, you cannot have something like this where your quarterback who's supposed to make millions and millions of dollars was placing bets a couple of years ago. Like, that can't happen. What situation would Ohio State have been in if this happened with Will Howard 2 years ago and there was no spring portal? Let's say there was no spring portal either. Like, they would have been in a really bad spot.
Yeah, Lloyd Jones is Texas Tech's backup quarterback, 4-star quarterback, number 399 in the Rivals industry rankings, second-year player, has thrown 5 career passes.
I don't think that's right. There was the guy who was their backup last year who had to come in for some games. I think he's back.
Interesting. That was a quick Google search, so give me 2 more seconds. Kirk Francis?
No.
Baron. I think Baron Morton's gone.
Yes, Morton. Yes.
Is he? I thought he was gone. Yeah, he's currently. It says per Wikipedia, it says he's a quarterback for the New England Patriots. Yep, he was a 7th round pick.
Okay. Well, anyways,
Baron Morton's gone.
Whatever. Regardless, whoever
but that's the point. But that's the point. It's right.
So yeah, it's something that Ohio State's going to have to continue to manage and maybe change how they go about things in the transfer portal, and how much you look into guys when you grab them. And like, these coaches make a ton of calls, right? Like, but I don't know. It's like, if you called Tom Allen, does Tom Allen know right away that Brendan Sorsby was placing bets? Probably not. Otherwise, Tom Allen would probably be in some trouble too. So it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope, and we'll see what happens. I know, like in the state of Ohio, they're talking about limiting, I think, like how much you can bet on college games to kind of try to protect these athletes, like from like the outside world. In the state of Illinois, like you can't bet on like Illinois or Northwestern or like Northern Illinois or
Virginia's
something like that.
Too.
Yeah, and they're probably going to try to take away some of these, like I think they're called like micro bets, where it's like first pitch strike, first pitch ball, like stuff like that. They're going to try to take away. But yeah, I mean, this is a political issue, legislative side to this. There's, the human side to this. There's a football side to this, right? And it all kind of goes in lockstep. And I think, I don't know, maybe this is just where we point to Jim Tressel and we're like, you're the guy who has to fix this because you know all the angles of it. That's our like pull in case of emergency name continues to just be Jim Tressel. Anytime something happens, it's like Jim Tressel will fix it. Okay, and then the other big thing kind of going on in college football news is the eligibility stuff that's being discussed. If I were to like predict what's going to happen, is we're on the verge of getting the 5-for-5 rule, which basically says like you have 5 years of college football or college sports to play 5 seasons. It starts, I believe the countdown starts at either when you arrive on campus or when you turn 19. Yeah. So basically what you're trying to eliminate is like a 27-year-old like Serbian center coming to play for like Purdue basketball, right? Like that.
Yeah, you don't want Akeem Mesidor being 26 years old or 25 years old or whatever getting drafted by the LA Chargers.
That's the core of this. But essentially, and what you're also saying is like Kenyatta Jackson, for example, is entering his 5th year. But the only reason he has a 5th year is because he redshirted 1 year. You're basically saying like, we don't care what you do, how many games you play, you get 5 seasons. So if you decide to play 4 games 1 year, like we're not giving you an extra year. We're not giving you a 6th year, right? Like you have 5 years, use it how you want, which I think to some extent is good, right? I think a guy like Caden Curry played a ton of special teams reps, early on in his career. It's like, does he deserve to not have a 5th year just because he played special teams, but never really factored too much on the defensive side? Like whatever your opinion is on that, I think it's fine. What do you think this means for Ohio State if it goes into effect? Like, do we see a lot of 5th-year guys who spent all 5 seasons at Ohio State playing for Ohio State? Or do you think it's like Ohio State's just going to go about business as usual and maybe there's some transfers that they pick up who are 5th-year guys?
This is a fascinating recruiting angle for me because I think I mentioned this before. Like, I don't think Ohio State's going to have a ton of 5th-year players on their team who showed up as high schoolers. Like, because one of two things is going to be true. Number one, I mean, if Ryan Day is going to sit there on whatever podcast that was and say, we recruit 1st-round picks and we want you to be a 1st-round pick, and he clarified and you knew what he was saying at the front, but right. He said, it's a mentality thing. You want to be the best in your position. You want to be that, and that's great and that's cool. But that's kind of true. Like for a lot of those kids, like they have this mentality, like I want to play 3 years and then leave. Like offensive lineman, defensive lineman, maybe a little bit different, but like I don't think Chris Henry Jr. is fantasizing about a 4th and 5th year at Ohio State. I don't think that Devin Sanchez is thinking, ooh, in my 5th year I'll be really good. Like Jeremiah Smith was never that. We're talking about Julian Sayin as like a maybe, but I don't think so at this point because like look what just happened in the NFL draft and look where quarterbacks can go. Like I don't think you're going to get a lot of 5th-year players at Ohio State because either one, they're going to want to be gone and they're going to be gone because they're good enough to go, or 2, Ohio State's going to move on. And I think that is the other part of this that across college football that is interesting. Sometimes it's not as simple as this kid just transferred. Sometimes it's a frank conversation of, hey, you've been passed on the depth chart, or hey, you got this $1 million, we're not going to give you a raise, or hey, you got this or whatever. Like there's team considerations here too, and you start to get to a point where it's like you start to put some names on it. It's like, okay, I was texting with one of the other beat writers. I believe it was $1.8 million was like a 3rd-round draft pick. Would you pay that for a 5th year of Luke Montgomery? I think there's a lot of people who would say yes.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people who would say, well, what if we didn't have to do that and we could use that extra couple $100,000 that we're saving on somewhere else? Yeah. And because, you can keep somebody else. And is Luke Montgomery going to want to stick around? Like, I think it's going to not really change a lot of what Ohio State is going to want to do because they're still going to recruit really well out of high school. They're still going to pull, kind of high-level blue-chip players out of high school. And then I think when you start to see 4th and 5th-year guys on the roster, I think those are going to be dudes who, end up like a Terry Moore or end up like like an Earl Little or end up like somebody like that where it's like, hey, they had a really good career at Virginia and they had a solid freshman year, blew out their knee their second year. Third year, they came back and had a really good year. And then maybe they were a fourth year where they were awesome, or maybe they just transferred for their fourth year. But I think you're going to start to see those type of transfer ups for Ohio State and fourth and fifth year players, where it's like, this guy was an all Big 12 player in his fourth year at Baylor, and now he's on Ohio State's roster. This guy was a fourth year player at, UCF, like a John Walker, and he was awesome. And now he's coming here. And I think that's going to be the type of veteran players that you see on your roster. And I think that's how if you're Ohio State, that's probably how you supplement this idea of losing so many third-year players to the NFL draft.
Yeah, it almost would just be you use the fifth-year guys, I guess, more so at positions of needs, whether that's a transfer, whether it's a guy you want to stick around. I mean, Ohio State's situation is intriguing just because they're going to have – they produce so much NFL talent that a lot of guys don't need to stick around for 5 years. But they do have guys occasionally who come through the system, and you're a very good college player, but maybe you're undersized and you're not exactly what the NFL is looking for. And it's like you can maximize yourself by staying in college, and you're a very productive college player to where Ohio State's fine with you sticking around. Caden Curry, it continues to be kind of the example that comes to mind. And again, Steve and I kind of talked about this a little bit after the draft. You can have this whole conversation of okay, if Caden Curry comes back, what does that mean for Quay Russaw and James Smith and other needs you have? That's a different conversation. But just in and of itself, Caden Curry, he was 5th or 6th round pick, whatever he was. Ohio State would gladly take a guy who had 11 sacks last year, and Caden Curry would probably gladly take whatever money Ohio State would offer instead of what the NFL was going to offer for a player of that caliber. Caden Curry was an awesome, really good college football player. He's not a highly touted NFL prospect, whether it's size, athleticism, whatever it may be, right? There's going to be guys like that come along, right? Where it's just you don't necessarily have the measurables to be a great NFL player, but you're really good at Ohio State, and Ohio State can use you. So there's not a ton of guys that come through that like that for Ohio State, but there are guys occasionally. So I think you could see Ohio State definitely benefit from this rule, assuming that it gets changed in the coming years. But I think you could also see Ohio State kind of just moving along with life as usual. And it's we don't really see that rule change really matter too much to Ohio State. I think the best part of it would be that when a guy arrives as a true freshman, let's use Jaquaden Guilford, for example, this year, do we think he's going to play a ton of games? Probably not. Do we think Ohio State is best suited kind of just redshirting him? Probably. But if that's not something you have to worry about, you're getting 5 years anyways, you can play him on special teams all the time.
Yeah, it frees up the coaching staff to not have to look at the roster and go, he's played in 3 games and we're 8 games into the season. We got to sit him down for the rest of the year.
Right. This was the CJ Hicks conversation we had last year, where it was CJ Hicks is only going to play 4 regular season games, and then Ohio State's going to shut it down so that he can redshirt. But Ryan Day's going on his radio show being this is really stupid because if the NCAA decides on December 20th that we're going to do the 5-5 rule, then CJ Hicks could have played every single game this year. And I'm not saying, obviously we know CJ Hicks wasn't an all Big Ten player and he ends up transferring to USF, but what does it look like if CJ Hicks plays all 12 regular season games, right? We saw him make a huge play against Texas. What if he makes a huge play against Michigan or makes a big play against Penn State? And it's now he's finding a groove and he's finding a role. And now maybe in the playoff, he is more useful for you, right? Is there part of you that wonders if CJ Hicks didn't just stop playing football for 2 months, would Ohio State have trotted him out there in the playoff? We were talking about that happening regardless, right? Is there a role for CJ Hicks when they get to the postseason because he can play? That's hard to envision when he hasn't played since September or early October.
Yeah.
But if he was playing, even if he was getting 5 snaps a game, does he get a rep against Miami? Probably.
There's definitely room for, okay, we're gonna play him against UCLA, and we're gonna play him against Rutgers, and we're gonna play him against. I'm trying to think who else they beat the snot out of. Wisconsin.
Yeah.
They beat the snot out of a lot of teams. But it's you're playing him in that situation. I think that's the interesting part about this, right? It's okay, then how do you blend this? Because it's okay, you have a 4th year guy who could stay for his 5th year, but he could leave. And I think, the conversations are going to be really interesting because at that point, we saw Ohio State like treat Wisconsin like a controlled scrimmage, basically, where it was like 17-0, and we're like, oh, they're pulling everybody.
CJ Hicks could have had like 3 sacks in that game.
Right. So it's like, is that benefiting you or is that benefiting him? Probably both. Because at that point, like maybe CJ Hicks gets more NIL money from USF, or maybe he goes to Texas Tech, like, right? And they're willing to give him a lot of money. Like it's that conversation. It's the conversation of, would you rather play him or Zion Grady? Would you like, how do you blend that together? I definitely think it'll change how Ohio State's depth chart looks and operates if this thing passes.
Yeah, but then even then the conversation changes, because it's like it's the CJ Hicks thing of like, hey, are we trying to save him a year here? But it's also the Zion Grady thing of like, you don't have to worry about Zion Grady only playing 4 games or whatever it ends up being. So I think the number one thing is like the NCAA, like when they start talking about these rules, like we gotta start putting some dates on this stuff and like determining when this stuff's gonna happen. Because even if they had said like, hey, we're gonna do the 5-5 thing, but like CJ Hicks isn't going to be grandfathered into this, then like Ohio State like knows how to go about it. Or if you do say, hey, CJ Hicks will be grandfathered into this, and it's like, okay, then we can just play him. Like we don't like putting dates and like stuff. Like right now, it's all just like there's so many things that are just floating out there that have like no answers, and it's like I don't know. And who knows? Maybe in 2 years, like the NCAA is not going to be making these decisions anyway. So it's like, what's it matter? But it's Ryan Day talks about it all the time. Like they need clarity, right? Like you just need to have like. Is the playoff expanding? Okay, let us know if it's expanding. Is the 5-5 rule coming into play? Okay, just let us know if it's happening. These things need to just be clarified and get some dates like put on some of this stuff. But it sounds like the NCAA tournament expansion is going to happen. It sounds like the 5-5 thing is going to happen. Like these things are coming. Like why can't they start putting some dates on it? I don't know. It's complicated, and like the president's involved. So it's like that's a whole other part of this.
Right. It's like welcome to college football. Like welcome to college sports. It's like you're adjusting for something. You ever seen Apollo 13, the movie? Great movie, by the way. I watched that when like Artemis 2 was like going around the moon, because I don't know, it just like striked up my
it's like when the Masters are on and I decided I need to go golf.
Exactly. Except yours was like physically good for you and mine was sitting on the couch eating like goldfish or whatever I was eating. But there's a part of the movie where they lose their CPU or whatever, and they have to manually fire it up real quick so that they can put them back on a trajectory to Earth, and they have to put it like in the window so that they can get their trajectory just right. Okay, well imagine that college football teams are Tom Hanks and the rest of that crew in Apollo 13, except there's no big Earth to shoot at, right? There's no target. Hey, are we going to go to a 20-team playoff, a 24-team playoff, a 28-team playoff, a 32-team playoff? I don't think anybody really knows. Hey, the Super League. Everybody talks about this idea of a Super League, but what the hell is a Super League? How many teams are in the Super League? Is it really a Super League if it's 80 teams and you just all break away from the NCAA? Like I don't know. If you, like I've talked about this a lot with like Virginia Tech, of like a team that played in a national championship game 25 years ago and was one of the more consistent programs in the sport 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And now they're like, oh God, we got to get our money right or else we're screwed. The 5-5 rule. Hey, if you're Ohio State, how do you recruit? The NIL rules, like that was one of the things that they got a lot of criticism for, was like, felt like a lot of these other teams, like Michigan was one of them, where it was just kind of like, they were just doing a lot of stuff where it was like, I don't know how this is going to pass clearinghouse. I don't know how this is going to do this, but they didn't really care. And they were basically kind of like in a staring contest with the NCAA and with all these people of like, you're not going to do anything. Okay. What are the NIL rules? Like everybody's aiming for a target right now that doesn't exist. There's no Earth in the window to shoot at. And like there's no, I'm pretty happy with that analogy, but like there's no thing that you can aim at. And I think that's the interesting thing about it. And I think Ohio State would love, you've got some time. It's April 29th. There's no spring portal window. The rosters are set. Everything is good. But I think you would love to maybe have an answer of this by August. You know in August what's going on, because, we saw it last year. They played CJ Hicks against Texas, but I think it was abundantly clear that he was going to be a depth player on that team. And it was abundantly clear that he was not going to be a starter. And that's probably why he said, I have to do this. maybe he plays, and maybe he's a depth player. Maybe Ohio State finds a role for him, whatever. But it would be nice nobody's super crying for these people because they all make millions of dollars. But it would be nice if there was something for these people to just say, these are the working rules. These are the parameters of which we have to work in. Because right now, instead of a hard line around the outside, it feels kind of like jelly, and everything's moving all the time.
Yeah. You got me thinking about space now, and anytime we're thinking about astronauts, it's just I'm going to watch Purdue highlights, watch little David Bell, watch Rondell Moore run around, watch Drew Brees sling that thing. That's where my brain goes. You're the movie guy. I'm the, I guess, go watch David Bell. Make some safe catches guy.
I think so. Jimmy Watkins, our columnist, told me one time. I think it was early on when you
Ryan
got
Brown.
here.
I forgot to mention Ryan Brown.
Ryan
Sorry.
Brown, obviously, right? The Ryan Brown Memorial Podcast. We are. I think it was Jimmy, or it was definitely Jimmy, but I think it was early on in your tenure where you were just you told Jimmy Gillis has seen a lot of movies. Jimmy told me this after the fact. You didn't tell this to me, and you were like, Jimmy, Gillis has seen so many movies. Gillis knows all these movies, and Jimmy goes, he's just seen a lot of the same movies over and over again, and he's kind of right.
Gillis is our movie reference guy. And listen, every pod needs a movie reference guy.
Of course,
desperately needs a movie reference guy. Okay, that was kind of all over the place, but that was fun. Gives our listeners here a lot to think about over the next week. Mm-hmm. We've mentioned it a couple times this week, but Steven's on vacation. I'll be taking some vacation next week. So this will be our last pod until May 11th. I believe that's the Monday, May 11th, which we've already recorded. So that'll be on your feeds. And then we'll be back in the swing of things that week. Recruiting is on coming up. Memorial tournament's coming up. That's always a fun thing in Columbus. Media days are only a few months away. The summer usually goes by pretty quick. So we're gonna enjoy our vacation time here and be back on May 11th. Until then, get the text. We will still be texting over these next few weeks. We'll be texting all the time. It's what we do. 614-350-3315. From Andrew Gillis, I'm Stefan Krajisnik. Talk to you guys later.